Contrasting Viewpoints with Ray Sclafani and Mark Hurley.
Ray has been one of the leading consultants in the financial services industry for many years, and Mark has annoyed countless people throughout the wealth management industry over the last 25 years with the white papers he has written. Today, they're going to provide their insights into what is really going on in the industry, some of the more absurd things they've seen, and also for anyone in this industry, some issues they should be thinking about as they try to build their business.
Well, Mark Hurley, once again, it's great to be back with you for another episode of these contrasting point of views.
It's great. Holidays are over. We're back to work.
Hey, by the way, your mic sounds much better today. It looks like you got an upgrade.
You can thank your colleague. She told me what to do.
Okay, terrific. So let's get into it. We've got quite a lineup today. We've got the CEO of the CFP board resigning. Maybe not a big story, but something worth paying attention to. My favorite topic, because advisors are asking me all the time about AI, and Jump just closed a $20 million Series A round, funding all kinds of new venture into helping advisors transform their practices. I know it's not your favorite topic, but we'll talk a little bit about that. M&A, while it's a hot topic, it's really going to start to matter. We want to talk a little bit about that. Specialization, welcome to the jungle. It takes a lot more to get to the Super Bowl, much more planning than most prepare for, so we'll get into that. You've got to be kidding me. Another one of our favorite articles from RIA Biz, so back to Brooke. And then our main topic today, you've been breached, now what? We've actually got Steve Ryder joining us, who's the Chief Strategy Officer at Visory. Many of you probably know Visory. They're the largest tech company working with hundreds of advisory firms. I think they've got the largest market share for IT services. So we're excited to be joined by Steve as well. Mark, you want to get into it?
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's not a big story, but on February 6th, the CFP board did announce that Kevin Keller was going to retire as CEO after, goodness gracious, 2 decades of serving as the organization's leader. And it's pretty well prepared. Succession, they're really taking seriously. He doesn't leave until April 30 of 2026 and has had one heck of a run, nearly doubling the number of CFP professionals to more than 103,000. And a record 10,400 candidates sitting for the CFP exam in 2024 alone. He's got loads of other accolades. But Mark, let me get your take on this very important announcement. It will reverberate through the CFP industry. What do you think?
Well, first off, Kevin did a lot of great things. You think about this, go back 20 years ago, 2005, what was the industry looking like at that time versus where it is now? And to do 20 years in a position like that and still be able to walk afterwards is a feat, given all the different constituencies. That said, the industry's heading into a new phase, and having a change in leadership there is probably timely. You're looking at the CFP board. More recently, I think, has more followed trends than actually led trends, and I think hopefully with the next generation coming in, a lot of that will change.
So new leadership should provide a different way forward. Anything in particular you think they maybe need to be thinking about when it relates to the jungle and what's changing in financial services? How should the CFP play, in your opinion?
Well, again, originally when the CFP designation came out, it was going to be the key distinguishing feature that if you didn't have a CFP, you really couldn't be in the industry. And what you've had is this homogenization of financial advice with all kinds of different designations and everybody calling themselves a wealth manager. And so, one of the challenges will be is keeping, competing effectively with these other designations and keeping the CFP as the key
as relevant
designation, if you're going to be a wealth manager. And that's going to be an interesting challenge given everything that's going on.
Yeah, and you've got other emerging designations like the Investment and Wealth Institute, Chartered Private Wealth Advisor designation, the American College, and others. So really interesting to see how that evolves. Okay, my favorite topic, because advisors ask me all the time, this AI. So Jump closed a $20 million round, Class A, Series A round, funding for ventures to help transform advisory workflows. AltFest president explains how advisors can use AI. That was reported in Investment News. So a growing platform called FP Alpha, which uses AI to assist advisors in tax and estate planning. I know Holistaplan has continued to expand its reach as well. I want to keep pressing you on this AI bit because I know you and I disagree a little bit on this. But what is your take on what's really going on with AI?
Well, look, there's a lot of stuff going on. The question is who's going to figure out how to make it as practical as possible for the wealth manager? Everything that's going on right now is sort of a marginal improvement as opposed to being a fundamental change. Where you and I disagree is I think that AI for a long time is not going to fundamentally change anything. Rather, it'll help make you a little more efficient at the margin, perhaps tweak certain things. The challenge, like for example, there's another great company out there called Daisy that's just come out, started by a former senior executive at LPL. And they're developing all kinds of tools to help people, particularly with prospects and things like that. The dilemma you have, though, with AI is that the fundamental business of wealth management, when you really cut through it, is helping people manage the most complex relationship in their life, and that is the one they have with their money. Whereas AI is designed to get you to a right answer. And there isn't a right answer here.
Yep.
And so there are things you can do, I think, that'll help the business be more efficient, and there's going to be a tremendous amount of money that's going to pour into these ventures. You've got venture capital firms that are breaststroking their way through $100 bills, so they got to find a place to put it to work. And these things are, AI is expensive. I mean, very, very expensive. So I think you're going to see, I would be surprised if you saw 50 firms pop up in the next couple of years trying to do stuff in this space.
And is it more just operational efficiency, helping advisors run sort of more efficient practices, better businesses, or do you think it'll extend into interactions and relationships with clients and how advisors provide advice and guidance?
I think it's going to be more so on the marketing side. And in a sense, tools for advisors to do a better job in targeting certain segments of clients. For example, I argued in that paper we put out last December.
The Welcome to the Jungle?
Yeah, that a year ago, December, that there are going to be two really groups of successful firms, these giant mega firms that are really emerging. But then you're going to start to see some real specialized firms come into the ranks. And if you're going to be advising somebody, it'll probably be as a specialty, a role where you help them create their wealth as much as you help them manage their wealth, as opposed to now somebody makes their money, then shows up at your doorstep and you help them run their money, take care of it, help them figure out how all these issues they're trying to solve. I think where the service extension is going to be is they're going to play a much larger role in helping these firms manage their wealth. And create this wealth. And so they're going to be experts in a lot of different areas they never were before. And I think AI is going to help them stay on top of that also. But I've not yet seen a company produce anything like that. The other area is, everyone talks about going and getting clients, marketing with this stuff. The problem is there's so many potential clients coming over the transom that nobody really has to worry about things like prospects. They just really need to figure out how to, get organized, be more efficient, and then at some point there'll start to be some real competition for clients, and that's where the specialization will come in.
Okay, so we're going to watch this AI even more closely and probably do a deep dive one of the months here coming up in the next 6 to 8 for sure. Okay, so let's switch gears and go to M&A. It was reported by Berkshire Global Advisors that in 2024 there was a healthy pace of deal making. It continues in M&A, robust valuations, and the demands of wealthy clients is driving some of this M&A activity in addition to all the private equity money flooding into the marketplace. I know we've talked about between $1 trillion and $2 trillion of money on the sidelines looking to invest. You've got large deals, mostly recap, happening in the marketplace, creative planning, Merit, Stratos. Berkshire reported that 269 total transactions last year occurred with about 1.7 trillion in AUM transferred. My take is this is just a fraction of the deals. Most of them are smaller and happening at a local level that may not even hit the radar in terms of what's getting reported. But I'm curious, how does this relate to what's happening in the jungle and whether or not M&A is really going to matter as it relates to organic growth?
Yeah, you and I are in agreement. There are a lot of deals going on that don't show up on the radar. And in fact, most of those that show up on the radar aren't what we would think of as real deals. For example, 21 of the biggest deals done last year would involve Focus doing deals with themselves.
Within internal.
I'm taking money from my right pocket, my left pocket. I don't kind of view that as a transaction. the the median size of a deal is like $600 million. And that's only amongst the big deals. If you actually push this down further, I would guess the actual median of deals they're not showing up is probably closer to $300 to $400 million. And so what that really is an acquisition. That's really a talent recruitment exercise. And what has been striking is that firms are openly admitting this right now. For example, EP Wealth started the year by buying a firm in Nashville, and their CEO got up and said, "This is being driven because we want to win the war for talent. Nothing about assets, anything else. This is about getting the talent that they need. We have a chronic shortage of people that aren't going to age out very quickly in this industry. And so the race is on to find the talent to take advantage of all this organic growth opportunities." The other thing that was striking to me is that one of the best firms in the industry is a firm called the Mather Group. They just eliminated a position for strategic initiatives and instead shifted those resources to create 3 senior positions, and all tied around how to get better organic growth out of the firms they already own. That's where the real future is here. M&A is sort of a tool to assist that.
Got it. Okay, terrific. So I know we're keeping a quick pace of important topics, and we want to get to the main event around cyber. But let's talk about specialization for a moment. There was an article in Financial Advisor magazine, getting to the Super Bowl takes a lot of planning. And coming right off of the Super Bowl last evening, as we record this right now, it's pretty clear that the Super Bowl's big business. Last year, consumers spent an estimated $17 billion on everything from tickets to snacks. Private consulting groups estimate that the NFL will bring in $1.5 billion in revenue in 2025 alone. And the perception is that everyone involved is going to secure significant financial windfall, but the reality is a bit more complicated. What's your take on this as it relates to planning?
Well, the article, which was in Financial Advisor, I look at it as a brilliant use of using a pub like that to market to athletes. Because if you actually read the article, they're talking about effectively all the things they do for athletes and why athletes face all these challenges. And that's a very tough market to be in. I mean, I knew a firm that for many years focused solely on athletes. And the hard part about it wasn't getting the clients, is that they all spent most of their money. That said, this is a sort of the inkling of this increased specialization you're going to see. People are going to figure some sort of seam of clients with a certain set of problems, and they're going to become the expert firm to go to work with that firm.
Well, and Jeremy Paul, who's a partner in Paragon Wealth Management, somebody I've known for 2 decades, he's worked with Grammy Award-winning musicians, entertainers, professional athletes. And so the showcasing of the expertise really elevates his firm in the marketplace through the use of the FA magazine's platform and reach.
Yeah. In fact, the forerunner of the firm Matter Wealth Management was started by Kathy Lintz, and they did athletes almost exclusively. They've shifted now to a multifamily office structure. And then Mark Grieg, who built one of the best firms in this industry, it's now part of Corient. Originally, most of their clients were athletes, and then they diversified into other areas away from that.
One of the key points I took away from the Barron's Independent Advisor Conference last year that was held in Salt Lake, there was a panel specifically dedicated to working with sports and entertainment. And one of the things I walked away from that session learning was that those that dabble in this space don't do well. Those that specialize win big.
Yes. If you're going to be a specialist,
be a specialist. Yeah, right. Got it. Okay, that's good heads up for everybody listening. Let's go to You've Got to Be Kidding Me. One of our favorite segments in our episodes here is comes out of an article written by Brooke at RIA Biz. You've got to be kidding me. Vanguard was pretty much bullied into accepting a sweeping pact with the FDIC to open its books, subject itself to audits, and never express an opinion directly or by proxy about any U.S. bank, he writes. This article could not be more off the mark. And so we got to draw attention to it.
Yeah. I mean, well, this is sort of fairly typical RIA biz, although they do check, and recheck. So let's be clear about that. But there are a set of bank rules that have been out there forever. This is not a political issue, which is how they've tried to frame it in the article, which have said if you own more than a certain percentage of a bank, you're a control party. And if you're a control party, by the rules published by the FDIC and by the federal statute of FDIA, your first duty is to the safety and soundness of the insurance fund. Meaning, whatever you do, you have an obligation to make sure the insurance fund never loses money, and it effectively creates personal liability for anybody who's a control party. So if you're trying to do these massive index funds, and as you're getting more and more money in, you're eventually going to clear these thresholds, you don't want to be subject to that. And so what the FDIC has come up with is a system by which, okay, if you're not going to be a control party, don't vote proxies, don't make comments, just be a truly passive investor. And, Brooke is having a stroke here, claiming that this is some sort of conservative conspiracy to block various proxy type strategies targeting banks. The reality is these rules have been around. I was a bank regulator in the early 90s. These rules have been around since then. This is nothing new. This is just simply conforming to the environment you're in as you get bigger and bigger and bigger and clear these pre-existing thresholds.
What's interesting is it's not news at all. Vanguard's a mutual company, and their job is to provide low-cost alternatives for their clients, and they're owned by their clients. So whatever profits they make, they return to their mutual.
Right. They call him a renegade? I mean, you've got to be kidding me.
This article's really off the mark.
Well, it's California. What can I say?
Okay, so now on for our main topic, which is cybersecurity. And we are welcomed by Steve Ryder, who I mentioned at the top of the episode today. He's the CEO of one of the largest market share tech companies that serves the wealth management space. Steve, we're really excited that you're here with us to talk about our main topic today.
Hey, thanks, Ray. I'm not CEO, though. I used to be CEO of True North before we merged up and created Advisory. So my technical title is Chief Strategy Officer.
Strategy. It sounds much more important.
So I'm not as important.
I don't know about that, Steve. You carry some big weight. Okay, so the headline here is, you've been breached. Now what? Let's get into this topic.
This stems from an article that Steve and I co-authored last month, and then there's a follow-on article that's coming out in Financial Advisor, because the first one was part 1. The second one was part 2. And one of the things that Steve and I talked about in this article was this notion of, all right, what are the things you have to do immediately if you're breached? And the single most important thing we talked about was you first got to figure out how it happened, because the bad guys are going to come back again. So Steve, you work with a lot of firms, probably more than any other firms in the wealth management industry of any of the tech platform providers. If someone has a breach, talk to me. What do you do first? How do you help them try to address this?
Well, first of all, they got to know whether. Well, again, I'm going to step back for a second. First of all, nothing's a breach; it's a data incident until it's proven it's a breach. So let's start there. Let's be careful. We say there's a breach when we don't know if there's a breach. So I'll start there. So how you know there's an incident is trying to determine if something happened on the network, right? So is there an event that's going on? It's important, firms have data that's gathered and kept an eye on the network to determine if there's any anomalous activity that's going on in the network. That's first of all. A lot of firms don't do that. Something happens that might alert them to maybe something happening, and then they'll reach out and say, I think something's going on, and they may reach out to our firm or another firm. So it's critically important, if something happens, they have to start doing something about it. The best thing to do is making sure they have a cyber insurance policy, reaching out to their agent, figuring out what the game plan is. Advisory itself is not a forensics company. We're a cybersecurity company that keeps an eye on the network. And if something happens, we recommend getting a forensics company to determine whether the incident is indeed a breach, or it's an incident meaning somebody got on the network but then didn't exfiltrate data. The moment data has been exfiltrated to the bad guys, that's when it's considered a breach.
And with wealth managers, not just data. We're really worried about money being stolen, which is their objective.
True.
But isn't one of the real problems this industry has is that only a very relatively, as big a market share as you guys have, only a relatively small percentage of the industry has actually figured out they have to do something about cybersecurity. So as a consequence, they're using for their IT some local IT provider who
are not experts in the space.
Yeah, but it's even less than that. What they're doing is take some off-the-shelf software, and they're renting it out to a lot of different types of businesses, not just wealth management businesses. And cybersecurity is really not their concern. It's not what they do. So all of a sudden, you're a wealth management firm, And let's say you get breached, and it ain't just data, it's money, which we're seeing about one a day is occurring right now around the US, these types of things. Good luck trying to figure out what actually happened. I mean, the average breach, we talked about this in an article, on a recent study found, is the bad guys are in there for 10 days before they're discovered. And they're doing all kinds of really bad things.
Hold on a second, though. Steve, I got a silly question. I'm going to show my naivete here. How many of these RIAs just don't have a cyber policy at all?
Boy, I don't know. Hopefully very few, but I think that oftentimes people just don't think how important all this data is. They insure, the buildings, the physical things that they see, but I think oftentimes they don't, feel maybe their E&O policy covers some type of an event or things like that. So everybody should have a cyber liability insurance
The problem,
policy.
of course, though, is a lot of the policies, quite candidly, are not even worth the paper they're printed on, because they've got so many exclusions. And then on top of that, you're right, they use E&O policies. But the most common way that money is actually stolen right now is what's called a social engineering attack, where they come in as posed as the client, typically coming in through the email of the client, but they also now are using a thing called deep fakes, which is a fancy way of saying they clone their voices and images. There's even a YouTube video. You can do this for Zoom calls, or you can, you spoke about, Ray, the family was buying an apartment in Paris, and somebody cloned their voices.
22-minute conversation over a voice, which wasn't the client at all. Scary stuff.
Yeah. And so one of the interesting things I've noticed in the insurance space is virtually every new E&O policy has an exclusion for social engineering attacks. And a friend of mine who runs one of the biggest wealth management firms on the West Coast was telling me that they went in and see what it would cost to get the exclusion out. And it was like 10x in terms of the premium. I mean, it went from, X dollars to 10 times that, because everyone's figured out that's the real risk. I mean, the other side of this, of course, is that if you get breached, you got three, and this is in the article that'll be coming out shortly on Financial Advisor that Brian Hamburger and I co-authored. You got three groups of constituents that you got to worry about very quickly. First are your clients, because if you lose client money, it's not just that client's money. It's every client, if they hear about this, is going to get freaked out. You're probably going to get sued. And so that's how they'll find out about it. But secondly, you got to worry about your custodians. The custodians, they view this as a $1 trillion moral hazard, and justifiably. I jokingly like to say, if you want to have fun, if you're an advisor, go talk to Schwab or Fidelity about this at a conference. Just be sure to bring a bottle of Xanax, because they all go apoplectic over it, because they have all this exposure. And then lastly, you got regulators. And, the regulators are every regulator is getting very serious about this. There's some SEC rules that are still stalled because of the administration change, but there's already a bunch of rules out there that are very serious. So if you get breached, you've got yourself some biblically sized headaches coming your way. And as we talked about in that article, Steve, you and I did, was first thing you better figure out how it happened. Because if you don't figure out how it happened and stop it from happening again, these guys are like sharks. They come back and keep feeding wherever they get food.
Yeah. One other thing I want to add to that, Mark, is I think oftentimes people misunderstand the word compliance with active security monitoring. Like, you can check a box off to say, hey, my firewall's enabled, I got antivirus running, I've done security awareness training. But checking off a box saying, hey, regulators come in and say, hey, we're in compliance, we're doing all these things, and we comply with what the regulation's saying. But who's proactively keeping an eye on the rest of the network? Who's proactively making sure, that training is occurring, that it's monitored, is the monitored of the network? All these things, again, as Mark said, if somebody starts wiring money out, how proactive are you doing something about it? So checking a box off saying you're compliant to the regulators is not a victory.
Steve, I appreciate you bringing that point up, because I hear from advisors pretty consistently when I bring up the topic in their Business Builders Academy workshops, and advisors sort of dismiss it like, hey, what, our chief technology officer, or we got an outsourced vendor we use for our tech stack, and it's their responsibility to deal with it. And they almost dismiss it like, hey, we're in compliance, we're good. Right. And it's much bigger than that.
It's different.
Yeah.
Different, right? Right. Agreed.
This is
Compliance.
the one
go ahead, Mark.
Existential threat to the business. Okay, I mean, think about what happens.
It's an immeasurable threat, really.
Yeah, someone comes
That's
in and
problem.
hits a bunch of client accounts, steals a bunch of money. Well, Yes, you're going to get sued.
And insurance isn't going to cover that, Mark. I agree with you. Insurance isn't going to cover that.
And
Just
then
not-
what's
they're
going to
just
happen
not,
is
you know.
every client you have is going to wonder, because the fundamental bargain with wealth management is that you're saying to clients, whatever happens, your money's safe. And this is
Mark, let me intrude for a second. That's really important, because that's what most advisors imply to their clients. We have a broker-dealer relationship or a custodial relationship. We've got our E&O insurance. Even if we've got our cyber insurance, the reality is the advisors communicating to the clients, hey, your money is safe with us.
Yeah. And, relationships in this space are built on trust. The single greatest threat to trust is you lose somebody's money. Think about how this industry came up. No other country in the world would you see small little businesses be able to convince people to give them their money, their entire wealth, and help them manage it. You go overseas, it's all big banks that are trans-amalgamated entities, because there isn't the sense that, okay, your money's protected. Now, this is helped by the fact that these independent custodians. And someone think, okay, my money's at the custodian, I'm fine.
Okay.
The client doesn't realize is that if that money gets stolen out of the custodial account and they are even indirectly at fault, they are not getting their money back. You want to talk about a revelation. So one of the things that we emphasize, I think, in this article and the one that's come out this month is, if you want to be prepared to deal with a breach, you got to do it before you're breached. It's not after you're breached. And that's why it's critical. You need to look at, for example, what is your technology platform? You need to look at something that we do with a lot of firms is, since you're most likely to be breached through a client doing something crazy, if you have a decent cybersecurity platform protecting you, then you should be figuring out how to get in front of that. So what do? We teach classes to advisors. We teach classes to clients. And so that if the firm is breached, then what happens is, okay, it changes this dynamic. Because, the regulators show up. Well, look, we told the clients what they need to do. That we train the employees to help them do this. And they even got CE credits for it. And then my company, which offers a service, if they don't want to do it, they can do it for themselves. That's great. But if you're in that position, you're just very different discussion. The SEC's gone on record as saying they view, if you're doing these types of things, as having a mature cybersecurity program. Similarly with the custodians. But also, let's say, okay, you've done all this stuff to educate clients. Somebody screws up, you get breached, you lose money. Good luck having a trial lawyer take the case, because they're going to say, no. Yeah, I'm having a very hard time suing these people. They told you what you needed to do. They offered someone else could do it for you. They have a clear record of trying to help protect you, and then you screwed up. Lastly, the brand. It's one thing if somebody loses money and everybody's hearing about, oh my God, this firm lost money. It's another thing if you've gone out and warned all the clients about these risks, you've educated them on them, and then it's like, okay, well, somebody lost money because they didn't pay attention. Very different sort of brand risk.
Steve, what's an advisor to do? You obviously have an incredible amount of experience leading tech stack and solutions for clients and clients of yours, which are large wealth advisory firms. What do you say to the advisor that says, hey, we've checked the box, we're good?
Yeah, Ray, you just read my mind here. I was just literally about to say it's not a checkbox. It's not a template. It's not something you can download off the internet and say, I'm in compliance. I'm doing everything I can do to protect our client assets. It is actually taking it serious and not, I'll say it, it's not cheaping out. It's really taking the word fiduciary to another level regarding the cybersecurity part of that fiduciary word, and realizing there's a lot more to it than just, back to, as you said, just checking a box. It's a lot of proactive work. It's a lot of keeping track of everything. I do agree with Mark. Mark's got a really cool business that, it's kind of this cradle to grave mentality where everybody in the part of the food chain of the money, whether it's the client, whether it's the client's client, the client themselves, the custodian, all through the food chain of this money transaction has got to be watched and monitored and managed and has really got to be kept an eye on by all parties, and it's got to be taken very, very seriously. Especially with deepfake now, what other things are you going to do to protect the money going out the door? Whether it's a PIN or password or something that only you and the client really knows, that it doesn't matter what if I look like the client and I might sound like the client, what's something that only the client and you are going to know to make sure I'm not the bad guy's not going to fake me out of getting the money out the door. It's in the risk is high. The risk is high, and the money is likely to come out of the RIA's pocket for sure.
And the good news is, that the technology has advanced so far now that you can access platforms like the one Visor offers, but there are others that provide what are called zero trust architecture. And if you talk to the people at the CIA, you talk to people at the Department of Defense, this is military grade type protection. What it's doing is it's looking from end to end, figuring out where are your vulnerabilities. You can get it protects you. It thinks through each of these different processes. It monitors the risk and has the ability to respond. For example, let's say some client's email gets hacked. You get an email in, it's got a virus on it, gets into your systems. All of a sudden they got access. All right, now all of a sudden you lose something. You got to figure out very quickly what happened. Well, the firms that do this full time, they have the ability to access different ways of scanning your system so they can quickly identify what it might have been and get it out. If it's some local guy who's, working a little shop and he's got 10 friends who he does some IT work for, you got no chance.
Not likely to have the capability to do that kind of level of work.
And these are great businesses. Why would you risk it?
Hey, Steve, you mentioned Mark's cool company called Digital Privacy and Protection, and I give him a hard time because the web URL is always hard to find for everybody. But it's DPRI.com, Digital Privacy and Protection.com. I'd encourage, if you haven't read the latest white paper from Mark and his team, called Confronting the Realities of Cyber Threats. It's an immediate download and read, and it's a pretty good step-by-step what advisors and their teams need to be thinking about beyond the check the box. Steve, tell us a little bit about what your firm does to help advisors sort of mitigate some of these issues, but more importantly, prepare for the future so they're well protected and are doing the right things.
Yeah, so thanks for asking. I mean, we'll spend some time, understanding their business, how they operate. Again, we're a managed service provider, we're a managed cybersecurity service provider. Our main vertical is the wealth management industry. So we have some really cool tools that we use. We're monitoring the network proactively. We're monitoring the endpoints, i.e. the PCs, the laptops, the firewall. We're monitoring proactively Office 365 for any anomalous activity. Using zero trust technology to make sure, as everything's up in the cloud nowadays, how do you make sure, someone's only connecting from a company-owned computer that has protected, it's encrypted, it's got antivirus or endpoint detection on it, so then they can't just hop on any old computer, to get access to the network. So those are the types of things. Again, so security is not convenient, right? Anything we do is going to be a pain in the neck, forcing multi-factor authentication 5, 6, 7 years ago was, even then people were like, really? Do I have to do that?
I remember even 20
thank God
years ago.
that's table stakes now. Go ahead, sorry.
Carrying around that little, I used to carry around a little tool, and every 30 seconds it would spit out a new number. And I hated carrying around that thing for cybersecurity and two-factor authentication. And that was over 20 years ago. Now that's all digital, of course, right?
Now that's all digital on your phone, but how many MFA codes and tokens do you have? Right. I mean, it's just crazy, to log. However, think about every moment that you spend extra time that delays your day, but protects your client. Right. So every time you say, shoot, I got to type another code. This is a pain in the neck. I have to verify. I'm not going to just respond to an email from my client who says, please rush me, $20,000. I got to buy this vehicle on sale right now. Every delay, every split second that you take and think and delay the reaction to it potentially saves your company, your client, thousands, tens of thousands, could be millions of dollars. So all these things are really important, and those are all things I talk about. And I pushed for years, and Mark and I got tons of stories. I was on a board of a bank for many years. So just a real quick story, and the security, I won't name the bank, but the security officer of the bank said, "Hey, we're going to allow people to work from home." This is before the COVID stuff, but I'm going to people work from home. We're going to allow them to, work on their own devices. What? What?
Yeah, the security.
No, you're not.
Right.
No, you're not. How many people are we talking work from home? 10 people. What's that going to cost you? $15,000, $20,000 to provide company-owned devices? Are you kidding me? But what happens is, people do get cheap sometimes, and they think about, I don't want to have to provide all my employees a company-owned laptop.